6:45 is the time right now. The nation is saying farewell to the late South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham. Funeral services begin today here in Washington and continue tomorrow in South Carolina.
Political analyst Dr. Gibbs Knotts joining us this morning as we look back at Graham's life, political evolution, and the legacy he leaves behind. Good morning, Dr. Knotts.
Good morning.
Good to have you. We know, Lindsey Graham became one of the most recognizable voices on national security. He was a foreign policy hawk during his 3 decades in Congress. And when you look back at his career, what stands out to you? What will define his legacy the most?
One thing for Lindsey Graham is he was so good at reading the political moment. He was a Republican in South Carolina when there weren't a lot of Republicans, and he came into Congress in that 1994 wave with Contract with America and Newt Gingrich, and was also, he ran against Trump in 2016. But once he knew that he wasn't getting the nomination, he pretty quickly got on board with Trump, who's obviously very popular in the state of South Carolina. So a really, really talented politician. And then I guess also just did great constituency service. I mean, he was somebody who, if you called the Graham office, you knew you were going to get taken care of. You were going to get some really good service. And that's also part of his legacy.
Now, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is expected to attend today's funeral. What does his presence say about Graham's influence on U.S. foreign policy, in particular, as the U.S. continues to navigate the conflict in the Middle East?
Yeah, I mean, that's not something you typically see you see it from a presidential funeral, but certainly not a senator's funeral. And so I think it just speaks to kind of how influential he was. I mean, how many trips, and keep in mind, Graham was, in the Air Force, was in the military, I think rose to the rank of colonel. And so he's somebody who just, dug his teeth into foreign policy and really became an expert, kind of that old school, roll up your sleeves and really kind of become an expert on the policy issues. He did that in the foreign policy space for sure.
Well, I think of, he had just returned from a trip to Ukraine when he was meeting with Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky. That Ukrainian president will be here as well for the funeral. So just this meeting of dignitaries to honor his life. Now, you did mention Graham's remarkable political evolution with President Donald Trump, going from one of his sharpest Republican critics during the 2016 primary. I think I recall he described the president as unfit for office at one point, and that was one of the nicest things he said at that time. How did the shift change Graham's role and influence within the Republican Party? Because we saw this about face where he really became what you could call a Trump loyalist to a large degree.
You described it very well. I mean, he was extremely critical in 2016 when he was running against him, but, got on board. And I think he saw where South Carolina was going. I mean, he certainly wasn't, Graham's not in a swing state. So his worry wasn't losing to a Democrat in the general election. It was losing a primary. And so I think that explained a lot of why he got, and he wanted to be influential. He wanted to be able to, get his ideas, through. And so I think he felt like I need to build a relationship with this president. And he would speak, in the Ukraine situation that you mentioned is an example where he would differ from the president a little bit, but they were in lockstep on quite a few issues.
All right. So his sister is serving in that seat for now, but it's a crowded field already. It's already emerging to be really crowded. What should voters be expecting for, and what should they watch out for as this race takes shape?
Yeah, I mean, you've got a couple of people currently in Congress, Ralph Norman and Russell Fry, and you've got this, kind of old school Southern politics where a relative is appointed, and that used to happen sometimes when men would die and their widow might get appointed, or sometimes a person's son or daughter. But this is kind of a little bit of familiar territory, not something we've seen lately, but it's going to be really, really short. And I think that, it's, whoever wins this is obviously going to have a very good chance because this is expected to stay in the Republican column. And so, it's a crowded field. I think people like it because you don't maybe have to raise quite as much money and it's going to be over quick. So, but a lot of really interest over the next few weeks here in South Carolina.
And to your point, she's running for a 6-year term with the president's endorsement. Now, finally, we wanted to end with this here. When history looks back on Lindsey Graham's career, often, right, politics depends on the lens with which you view it, where you come from. But how do you think, in general, he will be remembered?
I think somebody who was influential, somebody who really did his best to represent the state of South Carolina and to, try to help South Carolina get the resources they needed to continue to move forward as a state.
All right, Dr. Gibbs Knotts, political analyst with Coastal Carolina University. We certainly appreciate the conversation and you joining us this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.